The Holy Land, the Kingdom of Heaven, the grand central station for humanity's three major religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Ironically, but perhaps not so surprisingly, this is a land that has seen more than its fair share of violence, today as well as in its past. Join me today in this episode as we journey back to the 12th century to see how the Crusader States lost Jerusalem for good, leaving it in the hands of the Muslims. Hi, my name is Sebastian. You're watching Mistakes That Changed the World. Back in 1186 AD, the Crusader States of the Middle East used to be known as Outre-mer, French for overseas. The kingdoms, which thanks to some substantial trade incomes were quite prosperous, were founded in 1098 by the Crusaders. That income was sufficient enough to build a strong and impressive line of castles and fortress cities that protected the Kingdom of Jerusalem from threats posed by Islamic troops. This was the era of ground castles, and for sure, the castles of Outre-mer were among the most powerful and impressive. We begin our story with the death of the former king Baldwin IV, who had just died of leprosy. Having suffered from this terrible disease, he had no children, and so Baldwin V, his 8-year-old nephew, became king. Guy de Lusignan, his stepfather, was appointed regent. Baldwin's reign was short, as he died in 1186 of unknown causes, and Guy was proclaimed the new monarch of Jerusalem. The new king wasn't a very popular choice, and Guy was very aware of his lack of support from those who controlled the majority of Christian knights. And aside from this, some of them also created a much bigger problem. Just before Guy's coronation, some nobles had started attacking Muslim caravans. This was of course a very bad thing for the economy, obviously, but even worse, these attacks caused a rupture between the Christian and Muslim realms. These raids were an obvious casus belli, or occasion for war, and it also proved that Guy de Lusignan couldn't control a significant part of his new kingdom. On the Muslim side was Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub. He ruled the Islamic world from Damascus all the way to Cairo. In European history, he is better known as Saladin. His risen to power thanks to his military skills and charisma, earning the rank of general and eventually becoming the chief military commander of the Fatimid caliphs. Ultimately, he remained the natural choice to occupy the throne left vacant in Damascus after the last sultan died without any heirs. Even from this position, Saladin remained an unmatched warrior, an undisputed skillful soldier, renowned for his strong sense of honor and protection of the common folks. These qualities gained him a reputation that extended all the way into Europe, and even today, despite having led the largest Islamic empire of his time, Saladin is still remembered as an honest and just protector of the people. It's understandable that Saladin could not allow these attacks on his merchants to continue. The raids were both an act of war and a major provocation. And since Guy proved incapable of restraining his subjects, war became pretty much inevitable. However, it wasn't the decision to wage war the mistake that changed world history. Rather, it was the way Guy de Lusignan conducted that war. As it happened many times in history, once again we see a commander taking an army with numerous qualities and placing it in a position where all those qualities are rendered useless, instead amplifying the strengths of the enemy. And all because of a king who prioritized personal interests over those of his nation. The castles in Outre-mer and the fortified cities had thick, resilient walls, nearly impenetrable to any weapon Saladin might have used. These events occurred before the invention of gunpowder, so a solid wall 4.5 meters thick and 12 meters high made it possible for just a few dozen men to withstand several hundred enemies. Adding to this was the impressive strength of the Christian knight's armor. The chainmail and metal armor of a knight, coupled with a similarly protected horse, practically rendered them invulnerable to arrows, the primary weapon of most of Saladin's horsemen. The armor also helped the knights withstand most thrusts and blows from the well-known curved sabers used in close combat by Saladin's light cavalry. There was one little problem with this armor though. Outremer was situated in one of the hottest regions of the world, which meant that a knight who stayed too long in armor became vulnerable to dehydration and severe sunstroke, both of which could be fatal. On the other side, a significant portion of Saladin's army consisted of unarmored horsemen shooting arrows from horseback. These were supported by armored nobles with heavier weapons and their retinues, but even these wealthier horsemen wore relatively thin and lightweight armor. Though less protected, they were also way less vulnerable to the scorching desert heat. But perhaps the most crucial difference was that Saladin's army was at least 5 times larger than the largest force Outremer could muster. In his castles, Guy de Lusignan and his kingdom could easily repel any attack from a multitude of Muslim archers and nobles. However, being new to the throne, he not only had to repel attacks but also demonstrate strong leadership. This way, he could gain the support needed to maintain his throne and gain superiority over the highly independent nobles in Outremer. So, instead of waiting for Saladin to assault the stone walls, Guy decided to gather the largest army possible and march to defeat Saladin in battle. However, to muster enough soldiers and trained knights, the Christian king had to deplete all the garrisons in the castles, which meant that if he lost, there wouldn't be enough soldiers left to defend the massive and costly fortifications. This wasn't just a high-stakes gamble. Guy was all in. And he did it not for the good of his kingdom, but for the sake of his throne. On July 2nd, 1186, the largest army Outremer had ever seen set out with King Guy at the forefront. To mark the sanctity of the cause, monks carried a fragment of the Holy Cross before the army, a holy relic that was considered the greatest treasure of the kingdom. But behind the proud and devoted soldiers, the castles were left guarded by no more than 10 men, while cities had just enough armed individuals to maintain order. Between Guy and Saladin stretched an extremely arid desert. Saladin knew this and used it to his advantage. So almost immediately, the Christian army was systematically attacked by Muslim horse archers. Each attack forced the column to slow down or stop until the knights regrouped and chased away the nimble horsemen. It worked. By evening, they had covered less than half of the planned distance and were still many hours away from any water source. However, marching through the darkness would make the convoy even more vulnerable, so the decision was made to improvise a camp. This was a bad situation because it meant that even the horses suffered from thirst and consumed a significant portion of the available water. By the next day, the lack of water became a severe issue. The few wells they could use didn't have enough water for such a large number of people and their horses. Saladin's archers had caused few casualties, but that wasn't the point. The constant threat of arrows slowed everyone down and kept them in their metal or padded armor, which led to people and horses succumbing to heat and dehydration. Anyone falling behind was killed. At the end of the second day of marching in armor through the desert heat, the forces of Outremer were wandering, exhausted and thirsty. As the sun set, the army wound its way between 2 hills called the Horns of Hattin, with the largest one believed to house a good well. But the plan didn't work. Saladin had already demolished the well's walls, rendering access to water impossible. In the distance, though, the Christians spotted 2 lakes within a 2-hour march. There was more water there than they needed to quench their thirst and replenish supplies. But, of course, between them and their water lied Saladin's entire army. Still, the position on the Horns of Hattin was advantageous, as the steep slopes were easily defensible and slowed down any cavalry attack, so Guy ordered another halt. By morning, the Muslim army had completely encircled the two hills and the army on top of them. Trapped and without water, knights and soldiers endured hours of almost constant arrow attacks. They could barely move through the camp, and any attempt to organize for battle was nearly impossible. Horses began to die from heat and thirst, soon followed by the men. Some nobles gathered their soldiers and tried to break the blockade. Balian of Ibelin and a few hundred knights successfully cut their way with swords through the enemy horsemen, managing to escape the trap. They returned to see if they could aid those left behind, but were met by a force 10 times their size. So Balian had no choice. He turned and fled, becoming one of the few survivors of this ordeal. Reginald of Sidon then led another successful escape. He was the last. After hours of continuous attacks, a large number of Christian foot soldiers decided that enough is enough. They self-organized into a compact mass and attempted to make their way towards the two lakes and their precious water. They were killed to the last man before getting anywhere near the lakes. Saladin then ordered his horsemen to attack the hills. One assault was repelled, then another and another. However, the defenders, deprived of water, were losing more and more men with each onslaught. Towards the end, only a few hundred knights remained standing to fight when another attack overwhelmed them at the summit of the hill. Many of the fallen Christians had only been lightly wounded, but many had fainted and died due to dehydration and sunstroke. The majority of them were captured and spent the rest of their lives in slavery, building stone walls around the city of Cairo. In the weeks that followed, with too few defenders remaining, most castles and cities in Outremer had no choice but to surrender to Saladin. Guy de Lusignan waged the war as he saw fit, risking his entire kingdom to Saladin, and that's exactly what happened. By putting his army in a position that favored all the qualities of the enemy, Guy ensured his inevitable end. It took almost 200 years until the last remnants of Outremer were conquered in Cyprus. The initial goal of so many Crusaders, Jerusalem, was lost forever, and the history of the Middle East became a tale of Islam. That was all for today. I hope it was interesting enough to have inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. You can leave your comments downstairs, and you can also check out my Patreon page if you want to support me. I do hope to see you next time. Bye.